Hey everyone, I just wanted to give a little explainer video for a workspace that I'm sharing for creating generative patterns. So these are patterns that you didn't predict ahead of time, but might be interesting and are sort of created mathematically. Depending on what you use as an input source, they may also be unique every time you open or run the file. So I'm going to share the link below toward the generative pattern workspace, which looks like this, right? So this is all a little intimidating. So I'm going to pop over to a little explainer deck that I have to help everyone understand what it is exactly that I'm doing here. Okay, so the main concept with this workspace is that we're going to start with an input shape. We're going to do some manipulations to that input shape. Specifically, we're going to repeat and shift and overlay the shape on itself. We're going to rotate and join the shape into sort of a symmetrical or not necessarily a rotationally symmetric block. And then we're going to tile that block. And what happens with this is as we change the input shape, you change the output pattern that comes out of tile in interesting and maybe surprising ways. So specifically, the workspace I've set up starts with a sine wave sample. It used the shift and overlay multiple to create sort of a composite of a sine wave. It rotates that shifted and overlaid sine wave into a block, and then it tiles that block, adding an offset on each row, which is a newer feature of the tile operation in AdaCAD 5. Because we all know that these drafts look great graphically, but they may not weave in very interesting ways, I actually use what comes out of tile as starting artwork to fill with structures. So to do that, what I actually do is I stretch what comes out of the tile operation, for me by 30 ends and 20 picks. And that's going to create every kind of cell in the starting draft is going to be a ½ inch by a ½ inch block on my cloth. Then I'm going to use the fill operation to actually add structures so that all the white regions get one structure and all the black regions get another structure. What's really fun about this approach, in my opinion, is that you can start just manipulating variables in the chain and get these kind of interesting and unexpected artwork patterns. So this is actually what I wove and came out with, and this is actually where the workspace starts for this pattern, showing you the front and back there. And we are using a warp that has an end-on-end black and blue with red striping in it. And so part of the challenge was also thinking about patterns that would work in interesting ways with those color sequences. I started with two different inputs, the sine wave sample and random tree, and you can kind of see how um, those are manipulated. I did another kind of overlay of a gold foil just to see what it's like, but it ended up looking a little more like public transportation carpet. So I'm still kind of playing with it. All right, let's go back to the AdaCAD workspace. Now that we have that in mind. And what I want to do now is just show you kind of how I play in this space and invite you to do the same. So what I'd really love to happen with this workspace is that maybe you start with the template I've set up, that template, for generating patterns and then stretching them and filling them. But you might also have other ways of adapting this to your loom or your threading. And I'd love to see how other people kind of interpret what these patterns that get created, whether it's with overshot, um, whether it's actually weaving the structures on paper or something kind of thicker. I think there's a lot of spaces to play in here. So the main thing that you're seeing here, just to give you an overview, is this whole block of functions on the left is my artwork generation. So I have my seed drafts up here. They're manipulated as you go down. And then what you get out of the tile operation is generally what I consider to be the artwork. So I stretch that artwork. There it's loading. You can see it's quite big because I have quite a big loom. It's a little bit more helpful if we look at this in draft mode, because you see it more as artwork and less as structure. And then I'm going to fill that with my two different structures. So here you can see, ooh, it's quite dense, but I have sort of a two-pick satin and this sort of rep weave pattern. And my patterns are a little bit complicated because I'm playing with the coloring of my warp. So my warp is blue and black. I use like a magenta, and then I take two starting drafts. I invert the draft and interlace it so that I could start playing with the different color sequences. So let's go back to color. So in my black regions, I'm going to have this blue and black kind of rep pattern. And in my white regions, I'm going to have this, I think it actually starts with a satin, this satin that shows black on the front and blue on the back. Okay, so then I sort of fill my pattern with those, and then I'm going to preview it, um, and then stretch it for my TC2 and weave it. Oof, look at that. That's quite a lot of information. Okay, so that's maybe more than we need right now. What I want to show you now is really just how to play. So the way that I play is I pick the output draft that represents my artwork. So in this case, it is tile. I'm actually going to hide these controls just so we get more space on our interface. And I'm going to pin this draft. So pinning this draft, usually in AdaCAD, if it's unpinned, anytime I touch a draft, it shows in the viewer. Instead, when I pin it, it's going to only show what comes out of this tile draft. So what that lets me do is go all the way up the chain and start making manipulations and seeing how they affect the output. So here we go. First, maybe I start changing the frequency. Okay, that's sort of interesting. We're getting some things out of there. Now, the input draft isn't the only thing that I can change. Oh, that's sort of fun. So let's start here. I can go down the chain and then I have this shift and overlay. So what this is doing is it's taking multiple versions of that sine wave and putting them on top of each other. So you can see the output of that in this overlay multiple. But what happens is if I change the wefts here, I can actually change that starting input pattern and make some different things start to happen. Okay, it's a little strange. Let's maybe go back here. I can also sort of move it to the left and right. Oh, that's kind of nice. And see what happens there. Okay, this is where I'm rotating and creating a block. If I want to, I can change these values. See what happens. That's not as interesting. Let's go back to 270. Usually I don't change those. I really focus on doing all of my changes at shift and in the starting pattern. So let's just do that for a bit and see what happens. One other thing I wanted to show is this selector as well. So selector just takes a bunch of input drafts and kind of creates like a channel where only one of them goes through. So right now I'm selecting the first input, which is sine wave, but I can change that to be the second input, right? So if you wanted to hold on to a certain set, like, ooh, I really liked 170, you could keep that there and then add, let's say, another sine wave sample. Ooh, let's see. I'm going to make it. I was making mine 12 by 12, but we could also make it 20 by 20. Maybe we get some more interesting patterns out that way. I connect it into my selector, and then if I go and select that third one, whoa, that's kind of wild. All right, let's start playing with this. I can change the amplitude. Whoa. It gets a little bit easier to see when I go into draft view. And maybe actually I'm going to go down and tile it a few fewer times so that it fits in my view window. So right now it's doing 3 wef repeats. Let's just do 2. Okay. And let's see what happens when I start shifting. Okay. Okay. So there's just a lot to explore, right? What I like about this sine wave pattern is it feels semi-organic. Things come out that you wouldn't expect, and every once in a while, something really interesting happens that, um, yeah, I just find surprising. So I encourage you to play with this workspace and maybe find your own surprising outcomes and share them with the group. You could share it on Discord, you can share it on Instagram and maybe tag AdaCAD. You can also go and share your workspace on Discord so other people can see any manipulations that you've made. And you can do that by coming down here to the share icon or going to the library mode. And oh, since I've already shared it, I can't reshare it, but you should be able to generate a link there that says you can share it. Okay, thanks everyone. Hope you have a good day. Happy playing.